Welcome to Choice Classic Radio, where we bring to you the greatest old-time radio shows. Like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and thank you for donating at choiceclassicradio.com.
It makes sense, Watson. There is danger, Douglas, now at Burlston House, Burlston.
Inspector MacDonald here, sir.
Oh, come in. Come in, Mr. Mack. I fear this means that there is some mischief afoot. Great heavens. Why, Watson, what's the matter? That paper, those names. Just a little cipher Dr. Watson and I have been amusing ourselves with. What I came here to tell you was that Mr. Douglas of Billstone Manor House, Billstone, was murdered late last night.
It was a grim coincidence. Watson's my name, Dr. Watson. Privileged to share the adventures of Sherlock Holmes. I'll tell you about the Valley of Fear, which began with Holmes being rather bad-mannered. You'll see what I mean in a moment. Holmes? I'm inclined to think
I should do so, Watson.
Well, I count myself one of the most long-suffering of mortals,
But what, my dear Watson?
well, dash it all, you're really too trying at times. You sit there, your breakfast untasted.
It's Porlock's writing. There can be no doubt of it. The Greek E with a peculiar top flourish is distinctive.
Then who is Porlock?
Huh? Porlock? Oh, Porlock, Watson, is a nom de plume. A mere identification mark. Behind it lies a shifty and evasive personality.
Then you've something in common, whoever he is.
The point is taken. Porlock is an important man.
What?
Oh, not for himself, but for the great man with whom he's in touch. You heard me speak of Professor Moriarty.
Heard of Moriarty? He must be about as famous among crooks as...
He's the greatest schemer of all time, the controlling brain of the underworld.
But look here, Holmes, you were talking about this chap Porlock.
Oh, yes. The so-called Porlock is my link.
And this letter of his?
Something of the same kind, I don't doubt. If only we had the key to the cipher.
Cipher? Let me have a look at the letter.
There you are.
Oh, thank you. Well, nothing but groups of figures and 2 or 3 names. Not much use sending a cipher message to someone who hasn't the key, is it?
534C2. 1327-4 Douglas. 1726 Burlstone. 46 Burlstone. Huh. It's clearly a reference to the words in the page of some book.
Well, then why hasn't he indicated what book it is?
My dear Watson, your native shrewdness, that innate cunning which is the delight of your friends, would surely prevent you from enclosing both the message and its key in the same envelope. However, I shall be surprised if our second post does...
Excuse me, gentlemen.
Ah, Mrs. Hudson.
The second post has just come, Mr. Holmes. A letter for you, sir.
As I expected. Thank you, Mrs. Hudson.
Thank you, sir. Nothing for you, Dr. Watson, sir.
Very well. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Fighting on this, Watson?
The same.
Yes, we're getting on. Ah,
What's the matter?
dear me, this is very disappointing. I trust Porlock won't come to any harm.
Why, what's he say?
Dear Mr. Holmes, I will go no further in this matter. I can see that he suspects me. I had actually addressed this envelope to send you the key to the cipher, but he came on me quite unexpectedly, and I was only just able to cover it up.
Good heavens.
Please burn the cipher message. It can be of no use to you now. Porlock.
I presume the other was Moriarty.
When any of that party talk about he, you know whom they mean. Anyway, friend Porlock is evidently scared out of his wits.
It's pretty maddening, isn't it, Holmes, to think there may be an important secret hidden on this piece of paper and we haven't the power to penetrate.
Yes. But then I wonder. Look here. The cipher message begins with a large 534. We take it as a working hypothesis that 534 is the page to which the cipher refers. So our book has already become a large book.
Well, what else is there?
The next sign is C2. What do you make of that?
Oh, chapter 2.
No, hardly. If the page number is given, the chapter number is immaterial. In any case, if page 534 only finds us in the second chapter, the first chapter must have been almost intolerable.
Oh, column then. Column 2.
Brilliant, Watson. You're scintillating this morning.
Oh, thanks.
So now we begin to visualize a large book printed in double columns. Well, have we reached the limits of what reason can supply?
Afraid so.
Oh, surely you do yourself an injustice. If the volume had been an unusual one, he would have sent it to me.
So?
Don't you see? He used a book he thought I'd have no difficulty in finding for myself. A very well-known book, Watson. Large and printed in double columns, a book in very common use.
The Bible.
Good, Watson, good. But not, if I may say so, quite good enough.
Well, why?
Even if I accepted the compliment for myself, I could hardly name any volume less likely to lie at the elbow of one of Moriarty's associates. Besides, the editions of Holy Writ are so numerous that he could hardly suppose that two copies would have the same page contents. No, this is clearly a standardized book. He knows for certain that his page 534 will exactly agree with mine.
The almanac?
Ah, the almanac. Excellent, Watson. Excellent. It may be the very thing. It has a large number of pages, yes, and it's in double column. If I remember correctly, it's reserved in its early vocabulary, but becomes quite garrulous towards the end.
well, let's try it, Holmes.
Yes, now then. Now, here is page 534, column 2. Word number 13 is there. Put it down, Watson. There.
There, yes.
Word 27 is. There is.
Yes, that sounds better.
And next we have danger. This is it, Watson. I'm sure of it.
The word Douglas comes next.
Yes, and then 15, 16, 17. The 17th word, now. 21, 2, 3, 4, 25, 26. At.
Yes, there is danger, Douglas, now at Boylston. The word comes next. Then there's another number, then Boylston again. What?
43, 44, 45, 46. House.
Huh?
It makes sense, Watson. There is danger, Douglas, now at Boylston House, Boylston.
Well, Holmes, we did it.
We did indeed, my dear Watson. We did indeed.
Inspector MacDonald here, sir.
Come in. Come in, Mr. Mack.
Holmes.
You're an early bird today.
Watson. Morning, Inspector.
I fear this means that there is some mischief afoot. Great heavens.
Why, Watson, what's the matter?
That paper, those names.
Huh? Oh, this.
Just a little cipher Dr. Watson and I have been amusing ourselves with. We exhausted its possibilities just before you came in.
Well, I hate to spoil your pleasure, gentlemen, only...
Yes?
What I came here to tell you was that Mr. Douglas of Biddlestone Manor House, Biddlestone, was murdered late last night.
What? Remarkable.
Remarkable. And the reason I came to tell you of it is that our only clue so far is a card found beside the body with what appears to be a cipher written on it, the letters VV341. And I know your interest in ciphers, Mr. Holmes.
Mr. Mack, I receive a communication from a quarter which I know to be important. It warns me that danger threatens a certain person. Within the hour, I learn that this danger has actually materialized and that the person is dead.
I was going down to Biddlestone this morning. Now, it seems we might perhaps be doing better work in London.
Oh? How so?
Well, since I take it that envelope lying there's the one your message came in.
And your eagle eyes noted it was posted in Camberwell.
Exactly.
Well, I'd better tell you at once. My correspondent's name is Porlock. It's an assumed name. I promised when he first wrote that I wouldn't try to trace it.
Do you think there's someone behind him?
I know there is.
This professor I've heard you mention?
Exactly.
I might have known. Mr. Holmes, I won't conceal from you that we in the CID are inclined to think you may have a wee bit of a bee in your bonnet over this professor chap.
Oh, dear. Mr. Mac, you've read about Jonathan Wilde, I take it?
Yes, some sort of criminal in the old days.
Everything comes in circles, Mr. Mac. Even Professor Moriarty. Jonathan Wilde was the hidden force of the London criminals in the 1750s or thereabouts.
Ah.
He sold them his brains and his organization on a 15% commission. The old wheel turns and the same spoke comes up. Sometime when you've a year or two to spare, Mr. Mac, I commend to you the study of Professor Moriarty.
Well, he'll keep in the meantime. What really counts is that remark of yours about some connection between the professor and this crime at Billstone.
Moriarty rules his people with a rod of iron. There is only one punishment in his code. It is death. So we might suppose that this murdered man, this Douglas, had in some way betrayed the chief. Porlock would know he was about to be punished.
Well, that's an idea.
Or Moriarty may have been engaged to engineer it on the promise of a part of the spoils. Either is possible.
I don't forget it could be something entirely different.
Whatever it may be, we must look for the solution down at Burlstone.
Then let's be going. Oh, good Lord, it's later than I thought. You've got 5 minutes to get ready, gentlemen.
It'll do. Watson, be good enough to ring for our boots.
Right away.
While I change out of this dressing gown. Mr. Mac, the temptation to form premature theories is the bane of our profession. So let's make a bargain about that from the start, shall we? No theories from me till I can support them with facts.
Very well. A bargain, Mr. Holmes.
Good. Now, I can only see two things for certain at present. A great brain in London and a dead man in Sussex. It's the chain between that we're going to trace. Pass over that deer stalker. There's a good fellow. Watson and I don't get a trip into the country every day.
Pleased to see you again, Mason. Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, meet Mr. White Mason, Chief Detective of the Sussex Constabulary.
How do you do?
Glad to have you with us, gentlemen. Very glad indeed. Real downright snorter we have on our hands here, and no mistake. Well, there's a carriage outside, and Sergeant Wilson's waiting in it. He's the local man down here, first in on this business.
Then he can give us the details as we drive.
That's it. So come along, gentlemen. I'll lead the way.
Excellent. Excellent.
Well, gentlemen, it was 11:45 last evening. The first word reached me at my house. It was Mr. Barker come pealing like mad at the bell and told me there'd been a horrid murder at the manor.
Mr. Barker? Who is he?
Mr. Cecil James Barker, sir, of Hales Lodge, Hampstead, is the particulars I got. He's well known down here. Often comes down to stay at the manor with Mr. and Mrs. Douglas.
Thank you, Sergeant Wilson. Pray go on.
Yes, Mr. Holmes. Well, it was a little past 12 when I got there. The servants were all standing about in the hall. Proper shaking they looked.
I see.
Well, just then, Dr. Wood from the village arrived, and Mr. Barker led us into the room where the body lay. It was Mr. Douglas's study. You'll find it open straight into the hall, sir.
Just a moment, Sergeant. When you say Mr. Barker led us into the room, to whom exactly does the us refer?
Just me and Dr. Wood, sir. Oh, and Ames, the butler. Yes, he come in behind us and closed the door after him to stop the maidservant seeing.
And what did you see, Sergeant?
The deceased lay in the center of the room, sir. He was on his back with his arms and legs outstretched. He was wearing only a pink dressing gown with his night things under it. There were carpet slippers on his bare feet. His head had been nearly blown to pieces. God heavens. What's the blood about, then? Oh, something shocking, sir.
Any weapon?
Yes, sir. There was a shotgun lying across his chest. The barrels had been sawn off short, and the triggers were wired together, so they'd go off together. The doctor said he'd have the lot straight in his face, close range.
Nasty weapon.
Then this job, sir, as you'll see. Well, while Dr. Wood went upstairs to see to Mrs. Douglas, I got my notebook out and asked Mr. Barker a few questions. I've got the notes with me here. Yes, this is it. No. First of all, I asked him whether anything had been touched since the business was discovered.
No, if anything has been touched since this business was discovered.
Nothing has been touched in this room, Sergeant. You see it exactly as I found it.
And when exactly was that, sir?
It was just 11:30.
How long from hearing the report before you entered the room?
30 seconds at the outside.
30 seconds.
Poor Douglas was lying just as you see him. His bedroom candle was burning on the table.
I see the lamp is burning now, sir. That was lit later, no doubt?
The lamp? Yes. I lit that a few minutes after I came into the room.
Did you see anyone, sir?
No one. I heard Mrs. Douglas coming down the stairs, and I rushed out to prevent her from seeing this dreadful sight. Mrs. Allen, the housekeeper, came and took her away. The butler, Ames here, arrived, and we ran back into the room again together.
I see. Ames came with you then?
Yes, Constable.
Sergeant, if you don't mind. And now, sir, this moat that runs right round the house here.
Yes?
Would the drawbridge across be up or down at the time?
It was up, until I lowered it myself to come and fetch you, Sergeant.
I see.
You're wondering how anyone could have got away from the house after shooting Mr. Douglas.
Well, sir,
Unless Mr. Douglas shot himself? Oh, no. That is out of the question. If you'll step over to this window...
Yes, sir.
Now have a look at this. When I pull back this curtain, you'll see the window is fully open. That is just how Ames and I found it. And here on the window ledge, a smear of blood and this mark. It's my guess that's the mark made by the sole of someone's boot as he was getting out.
I see what you mean, sir. Dropped down into the moat and waded across, you see.
But you see, when I close the curtain again, the window's quite screened off.
Now, can you tell me, sir, what time the drawbridge would have been raised for the night?
Ames could tell you that. Ames?
It was nearly 6 o'clock.
If anyone come from outside, they must have got in across the bridge before 6 and hid somewhere till Mr. Douglas come into the room.
The man was waiting for him in here. He shot Mr. Douglas, left the gun behind him, and got away through the window. That's how I read it, Sergeant.
Very likely, sir, very likely.
Dr. Wood. How is she?
Mrs. Douglas? Oh, she's bearing up remarkably well in the circumstances, I'd say.
Oh.
Hello, Sergeant. You found something?
Yeah. This card, sir. Under the dead man's shoulder. You haven't spotted it?
Why, no, I never noticed it at all. Now, what's that written on it?
VV341. Scribbled in ink. Nothing else.
What on earth can that mean?
Beyond me, for the moment, sir.
Oh, by the way, Sergeant, this hammer on the rug here, want me to examine it? It might just be a bloodstain, you know. Yes, looks quite clean, though, to me.
Better put it back on the rug where you found it, please, Doctor. I'll catch it if anything's got moved before the detectives get here.
Oh, I'm sorry, Sergeant. I should have known better. I wonder what it was doing on the floor.
Mr. Douglas was altering the pictures yesterday. That's the hammer he was using, that's all.
I see. Well, perhaps I'll take a closer look over the body. No marks of violence, save for the head wounds. You never know, though.
Right you are, Doctor. Now, I'd better take a good look round this room, too.
Yes, but I'd have thought... What is it, Sergeant?
See these marks, sir?
Where?
Here, under the curtain. Marks of muddy boots.
Joe, yes.
What time would these curtains be drawn last night?
At 4 o'clock, sir, when the lamps were lit. And that seems to bear out my theory, doesn't it? A burglar, perhaps.
I say, never seen a mark like this before.
Now, what have you found, Doctor?
Here, on the forearm.
Let me see. Well, sort of tattoo. A triangle inside a circle.
Yes, sir. Many a time I've seen that mark when the master rolled his sleeves up to wash. He never told me what... Well, strike me.
Ames.
Oh, I do beg pardon, sir. Look, sir. The master's wedding ring. It's gone.
Good Lord.
You're sure about that, Mr. Holmes?
No doubt at all, Sergeant. Always wore it. That ring with the rough nugget on it was a buddy.
Quite right, Ames. Just a minute now, just a minute. Did you say the nugget ring was always wore above the wedding ring?
Always. Never changed.
That means the murderer, or whoever it was, took that nugget ring off him to steal the wedding ring, and then put the nugget ring back on again.
There's the nugget. The wedding ring's gone.
Well, that makes this the rummest jewel I ever struck. It's a deal too thick for the likes of me, and I don't mind things. And that's about as far as I can report to you, gentlemen.
Remarkable. Most remarkable. Do you know, I can hardly recall any case in my experience where the features have been more peculiar.
I rather thought you'd say that. We're well up with the times in Sussex, you can see.
Yes, indeed.
Well, I arrived to take over from Sergeant Wilson between 3 and 4 this morning. I examined the gun. There is no complete maker's name on it. Just the first 3 letters on the fluting between the barrels. The rest being cut off by the saw.
What 3 letters?
P-E-N. I can't think what that comes from.
Pennsylvania Small Arms Company. American firm.
Well, I've heard about sawed-off shotguns in the States. It might mean the chap who broke in and killed Douglas was an American.
Sir, there is one other thing. Yes? About America, sir. The deceased and his wife spent a long time living there, in California.
Oh, that's interesting, Holmes? Anything else, Sergeant?
Well, sir, just that Mr. Cecil Barker was in America, too. He told me he was a friend with Mr. Douglas there.
Oh, by the way, Mr. Holmes, Ames says he's never seen a gun of this sort in the house before.
The gun was made to conceal. It would fit into any box.
But why would a murderer carry a shotgun in with him? If he'd any sense, he'd choose the quietest weapon he could find. Something he can kill with and not make a sound. See through the moat and well clear of the place hours before anyone finds what's happened.
You're right there. I take it this is our destination.
Yeah, this is Burlston Manor.
I say. Quite a place, eh?
17th century, most of it, they tell me.
Uh-huh. That's our celebrated moat.
Yes.
Pretty muddy looking, isn't it?
Well, the water brings down the clay. It's generally about this color.
You know, a chap could have drowned in it, couldn't he? You'd never spot him under that.
Not much likelihood of that. Oh, not more than a foot deep near the edges and 2 at the most in the middle. Well, then, here we are. Sergeant Wilson.
Sir?
You can take the carriage and get away home for some rest.
Thank you, Mr. Mason, sir. My missus was wondering where I've got to since last night.
All right, then. Out we get.
Close the door, will you, please, Ames?
Yes, sir.
Inspector MacDonald and Mr. Holmes would like to ask you a few questions.
Ames, I understand you to have said that you often saw this mark on your late master's forearm.
Frequently, sir.
You never had anyone refer to its meaning?
Never, sir.
I noticed there's a small piece of plaster at the angle of the deceased's jaw. Here, do you see?
Yes, I see it, sir. He cut himself shaving yesterday morning.
Did he appear nervous at all? Could that be why he cut himself?
It struck me he was a little restless and excited, sir.
Mr. Holmes, anything to add?
Thank you.
Ames, this card with VV341 scrawled on it, sir. I noticed that in this room there is only black ink in the inkwell.
Always.
But this writing is purplish in color. It's been done with a broad pen, and the ones in here are fine. Obviously, then it wasn't written in here.
That's a point.
Can you make anything of the inscription, Ames?
No, sir. Nothing.
It makes me think at once of some society or other.
And I'm inclined to agree with you, Dr. Watson. What about that, Mr. Holmes? An agent from this society gets into the house, waits for Douglas, kills him, and escapes by way of the moat. But he leaves this card behind so that when the case is reported in the papers, the other members of the society will know the deed's been done. Vengeance or something.
Plausible. But why this clumsy weapon?
Well...
And why the missing ring? And why no arrest? It's past 2 now. I take it that since dawn, every constable within 40 miles radius has been out looking for signs of a wet stranger.
They certainly have, Mr. Holmes.
Unless he's got a hideaway nearby or a change of clothes, they can hardly miss him. And yet they have missed him up to now. Well, Ames, I think that is all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, one moment, Ames.
Yes, Mr. Holmes.
What is this under the side table?
Those are Mr. Douglas's dumbbells, sir, for exercise.
Dumbbell? I think you mean. There's only one.
Well, there were two, sir. The other must be somewhere about. I haven't noticed for some months.
One dumbbell. Very well, then, Ames. That'll do.
Thank you, sir. Oh, Mr. Barker, sir.
Ames. May I come in, gentlemen?
By all means, Mr. Barker.
I don't wish to interrupt you, but...
Oh, not at all, sir.
Your fellows have found a bicycle.
Where?
In a clump of evergreens not 100 yards from the hall door. Obviously hidden, I'd say.
Now, that's a new line of reckoning. Come on, Mason, we'd better take a look at once.
Yes. You coming, Mr. Holmes?
Of course.
Now, what in the name of all that's wonderful makes the chap leave it behind? And how in the world has he got away? We don't seem to get a gleam of light in this case, do we, Mr. Holmes?
Don't we, Mr. May? I wonder.
The Valley of Fear was one of the stories about Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. We're presenting it in 3 parts. You've just been listening to part 1. In real life, my name is Norman Shelley. My friend Carlton Hobbs played Sherlock Holmes, and I was Dr. Watson. Michael Hardwick wrote our script for this BBC production from London. We look forward to the pleasure of your company again very soon for part 2 of The Valley of Fear.
The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes.
I remember one thing in particular. The Valley of Fear.
The Valley of Fear?
Yes, he said more than once. I've been in the Valley of Fear. I'm not out of it yet.
Of course, you asked him what he meant by that.
Oh, I did. He would only shake his head and tell me it was bad enough for one of us to have been in its shadow. He once said, "Please God, it will never fall upon you."
Yet for the beautiful Mrs. Douglas, the shadow had fallen in the shape of murder. And it was still a mystery for my friend Holmes. My name is Watson, Dr. Watson, and it was my privilege to share the adventures of Sherlock Holmes. If I may summarize the case so far, I will then tell you what happened next in the Valley of Fear. I set down exactly what Holmes said in my notebooks. I can hardly recall any case where the features have been more peculiar. My friend Sherlock Holmes said to me, downright baffling, I'd have said. Holmes had received a warning from an informer that danger threatened a man called Douglas at Burlston in Sussex. Within a few moments, we'd had Inspector MacDonald of Scotland Yard round to tell us that one John Douglas of Burlston Manor had been murdered, and a sort of code message left on a card beside the body. VV341, it had said. Just VV341. When we got to Burlston, we learned that the dead man had been found with his face almost blown to bits and an American sawn-off shotgun across his body. The murderer had taken the wedding ring from his finger, but to do so, he'd had to remove another ring which Douglas had been wearing above it. And yet this other ring was still on the dead man's finger when we saw him. Well, there were other clues, a sort of brand mark on the dead man's arm. Oh, and Holmes seemed to be interested that one of a pair of dumbbells was missing from the room. Can't think why, though. And then Douglas's friend Cecil Barker, who'd found the body, came in to tell us that a bicycle had just been found hidden near the manor house, as though the murderer had meant to get away on it, but hadn't. We had a look at it. There was nothing to help us. Common enough make, nothing in the saddlebag. So we went back into the house, and Inspector Mason of the Sussex Constabulary rang for the butler Ames to come and answer us.
Oh, excuse me, gentlemen. I heard the bell, and Mr. Ames is round at the kitchen garden for a minute. Can I do anything?
Oh, this is Mrs. Allen, the housekeeper. Inspector MacDonald, Scotland Yard. How do you do? Mr. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, Mrs. Allen. They'll want a word with you later, but now if you...
No, never mind for the moment. We'll speak to Mrs. Allen now she's here. Take a seat, ma'am.
Oh, yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Now, Mrs. Allen, take your time and tell us what happened here last night where you were concerned.
Yes, sir. Well, I was in my room when the bell rang. It rang very violently, so...
That was the first sound you heard?
Yes, Mr. Holmes. I didn't hear the gun go off, if that's what you mean. My room's right at the back of the house.
I see. Did you notice the time when the bell rang?
No, sir, not then. I came out to see what it was about, and I met Mr. Ames coming from his pantry at the back of the house.
Go on then, Mrs. Allen.
We came up to the front of the house together. And just at the foot of the stairs, we saw Mrs. Douglas coming down.
In a hurry?
No, just walking normally. Then Mr. Barker came rushing out of the study, this room. He rushed up to Mrs. Douglas and said, "For God's sake, go back to your room. Poor Jack is dead. You can do nothing. For God's sake, go back."
Did she faint?
No, sir. Didn't scream or anything. Mr. Barker turned to me and told me to take her back to her room. And I did.
Mrs. Allen, you're quite sure you heard no sound of the gun going off? Nothing which you might have thought at the time was something else?
Nothing at all, sir. As I say, my room's a long way back, and I'm a little hard of hearing.
Quite, I understand.
Oh, I did hear something a while before, like a door slamming. I thought at the time.
How long before?
Oh, half an hour before the bell rang.
Oh, I see.
Easily half an hour, without a doubt.
Any more questions, Mr. Holmes?
No, thank you.
Well, thank you then, ma'am. Perhaps you'll ask Mr. Barker to step this way.
Oh, very good, sir.
Singularly interesting. Well, thank you, Mr. Barker. It doesn't add much to what we've already had from you, of course, but we have to...
Of course, I understand. Mr. Barker, I understand that Mr. Douglas emigrated from Ireland to America and eventually reached California, where you met him. You became partners in a successful mining venture at a place called Benito Canyon? That is so. Mr. Douglas was a widower, I believe. He was. Now, when Mr. Douglas left America to come home, was it a sudden decision?
Yes, it was.
And the more I think about it, Mr. Holmes, the more I'm convinced this secret society idea has got something to tell us about all this.
Some sort of feud, perhaps. A grievance from the days before you met him.
Maybe, Doctor. I understand Mr. Douglas's marriage took place in this country about 5 years ago. Had you returned here by then? I was his best man, I see.
Did you know Mrs. Douglas before the marriage?
No, I did not.
But you've seen a good deal of her since.
I've seen a good deal of him since.
Mr. Barker, did Mr. Douglas entirely approve of your friendship with his wife?
You imagine that anything...
I imagine nothing. We only want the facts.
Some inquiries are offensive.
They're not meant to be, sir. I must repeat my question.
And I must refuse to answer.
You can refuse to answer, but that might be taken as an answer in itself. Now, did Mr. Douglas approve your friendship with his wife?
You can take it from me, gentlemen. No man ever had a more loving, faithful wife. And I can say no friend could be more loyal than I was.
You're aware, sir, that the dead man's wedding ring has been taken from his finger. So it appears. Under the circumstances, wouldn't it appear to most people that there might be some link between the marriage and the murder?
I cannot profess to say what it suggests. There is one more small point, Mr. Barker. When you entered the room last night, there was only a candle lighted on the table, was there not? That is so. You rang for help at once? Yes. And it arrived very speedily, within a minute or so. And yet, according to Ames's statement to the police sergeant, when he arrived in the room, the candle was out, and the lamp had been lit. Why did you pause to do all that with such a startling tragedy before you? The candle threw a very bad light. The lamp was on the table, so I lit it. And blew out the candle? Yes.
We'd better see Mrs. Douglas.
Yes, of course. I'll fetch her for you.
Have you found out anything yet, Inspector?
Nothing yet, ma'am. We're pressing ahead with our inquiries.
Inspector, every possible effort must be made.
Oh, rest assured, ma'am. It would help us if you could answer a few questions now.
Yes, I'm ready.
This chair.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Watson.
Mrs. Douglas, we've heard from Mr. Barker that you didn't enter this room after the tragedy occurred.
No, he turned me back on the stairs. He begged me to go back to my room.
That's quite so. You had heard the shot and you had come down at once?
Yes.
How long would it be after hearing the shot that you were stopped on the stair by Mr. Barker?
Oh, it may have been a couple of minutes. It's so hard to reckon the time exactly. It was all like some dreadful dream.
Of course. But can you give us any idea how long your husband had been downstairs before you heard the shot?
I can't say. I didn't hear him leave his dressing room. He did the rounds of the house every night. He was so nervous.
Nervous, Mum? Nervous of what?
Wildfire.
Anything else?
No, nothing. What should there be?
During the 5 years you were married to him, did you ever hear him speak of anything that happened in America? Something that might still bring danger to him?
Well, yes. I've often thought there was something dangerous hanging over him. I asked him about it more than once, but he wouldn't tell me anything. But he knew I knew.
How did you know, Mrs. Douglas?
Oh, how does a woman know there's something on her husband's mind? Oh, I knew it by the way he wouldn't talk about parts of his life in America. I knew it by the way he'd look at unexpected strangers. I knew it by words he'd let fall.
Might I ask what the words were, Mrs. Douglas?
Well, I remember one thing in particular. The Valley of Fear.
Valley of Fear?
Yes, he said more than once, I've been in the Valley of Fear. I'm not out of it yet.
Of course, you asked him what he meant by that.
Oh, I did. He would only shake his head and tell me it was bad enough for one of us to have been in its shadow. He once said, please God, it will never fall upon you.
Nothing more?
No, nothing more.
Mrs. Douglas, no doubt you heard about this strange business of your late husband's wedding ring.
Oh, about its being taken from his finger?
Yes.
It's certainly a most extraordinary thing. Why, he couldn't even get it off himself. It was much too tight.
It suggests nothing to you?
No. No, nothing at all.
Well, Mrs. Douglas, we won't detain you any longer. No doubt there'll be some other points later, but we can refer them to you as they arise.
Oh, thank you, gentlemen. You will only to send for me.
No, not at all.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Watson.
I should like to see Ames again, Mr. Mack, if you don't mind.
All right, Mr. Holmes.
I'll ring.
She's a deuced lovely woman. Yes, and this fellow Barker's been down here a good deal. He's a man who might be attractive to women.
You rang, gentlemen? Yes, Ames. I'd like you to recall for me what Mr. Barker had on his feet last night when you joined him in here.
After the crime, sir?
That's right.
Why, he had his bedroom slippers on, sir. I remember. I brought him his boots to go for the police.
Where are the slippers now, do you know?
Under the chair in the hall, Mr. Holmes. Saw them just a while ago.
But, sir, it's important for us to know which marks may have been made by Mr. Barker's feet and which are from someone else's.
Oh, I see, sir. I may say, sir, that I noticed Mr. Barker's slippers were stained with blood. So were mine when I looked at them later.
That's natural enough, considering the condition of the room. Oh, by the way, where is Mr. Barker now?
He's out in the garden, sir.
Well, then, to save bothering him, perhaps you'd just bring those slippers in here before you go.
Certainly, sir.
What's all this about, Holmes? Have you got an idea?
We must leave no possible clue unsifted, my dear Watson.
Here you are, sir.
Ah, thank you, Ames. That will be all. We'll replace the slippers ourselves.
Very good, sir.
Now, let's have a look at these slippers. Strange. Very strange indeed. And now, let's have a look at that windowsill. Try this slipper over the stake. And...
It's exactly. Look, Inspector.
Never a doubt of it.
Then that mark came from Barker's own slipper.
But what's the game, Mr. Holmes?
Why, Mr. Holmes? What's the game? Dr. Watson, sir.
I've left my colleagues to it for a little while.
Yes, sir.
I thought I'd take a turn round the garden, if it is the garden I'm heading for.
That's right, sir. Keep along this hedge till just down there. There, where that tree is.
I see.
There's a break in the hedge there, straight into the garden.
Ah, splendid. Thank you, Ames.
Very good, sir.
Scott.
Dr. Watson.
Mr. Barker. Mrs. Douglas,
Dr. Watson, Mrs. Douglas and I were just sitting here talking this terrible business over, and would you be so good as to come and have a word with the lady for a moment?
Very well, if you wish.
Dr. Watson, I've no doubt you heard us laughing just now. I'm afraid you're thinking me callous and hard.
It is no business of mine, ma'am.
Oh, perhaps someday, Doctor, you'll do me more justice. Oh, if only you realize...
Ivy, there is no reason why Dr. Watson should realize. As he says, it is no business of his.
Exactly. And so I'll beg your leave to resume my walk.
No. But one moment, Doctor. There's one question you can answer with more authority than anyone else in the world. And it may make a great difference to me.
Take care.
It's all right, Cecil. Dr. Watson, please hear me.
Very well.
You know Mr. Sherlock Holmes better than anyone else. Now, supposing a matter were brought confidentially to his knowledge, is it absolutely necessary for him to pass it on to the detectives?
He would not conceal from them anything which would help bring a criminal to justice. Beyond that, ma'am, I'm not prepared to go. If you want fuller information, I'd refer you to Mr. Sherlock Holmes himself. Now, if you'll be kind enough to excuse me, I'll be on my way.
No, Watson. I want none of their confidences.
No, I thought you wouldn't.
You acted quite correctly. No confidences. They can prove mighty awkward if it comes to an arrest for conspiracy and murder.
You think it's going to come to that, Holmes?
My dear Watson, when I have exterminated this fourth egg, I will be ready to put you in touch with the whole situation.
Well, you've fathomed it already?
Oh, I don't say we've fathomed it exactly. Far from it. But when we traced that missing dumbbell...
Missing dumbbell?
One dumbbell, Watson. Consider an athlete with one dumbbell. No? Picture to yourself the unilateral development, the imminent danger of a spinal curvature through using one dumbbell. Shot. Now then, for a nice, quiet pipe.
Well, what's it all about then, Holmes?
A lie, Watson. What? Barker's whole story is a great, big, thumping, obtrusive, uncompromising lie. But it's corroborated by Mrs. Douglas. Therefore, they're both lying. And they're in a conspiracy to lie. According to the story we've been given, the murderer had less than a minute after he'd committed the crime to take that tight-fitting ring from Douglas's finger. And that meant taking the top ring off first and putting it back again. He had to do all that and get clean out of it before Barker came in. I say it was impossible.
That's pretty tall order, isn't it?
Impossible. Now about the candle.
Yeah.
With all the other things he had to do, would the murderer also blow out the candle and light the lamp before leaving?
No, hardly.
Hardly indeed. Barker is lying when he says he lit the lamp after he found the body. It was lit already.
Well, I say then, Holmes, your man...
Except Ames.
Well, he was in the pantry, or so he says.
We'll accept that for the moment. Ames says he heard no sound. We'll accept that also. The pantry's a long way back, and there are several doors between it and his room, but the housekeeper's room isn't so far. I've been down to see it, and there's no reason for not hearing the 2 barrels of a shotgun fired here in the study from there.
Yes, but she's rather deaf, though, and she told us.
Even so, she also told us she remembered hearing a sound like a door slamming half an hour before the alarm was given. That would be 11:15. There's no doubt in my mind that it was the actual shot she heard, and that was the time it was fired.
11:15. I don't quite follow, Holmes. Both Barker and Mrs. Douglas admit they heard the shot. Now, if it was half an hour before Barker gave the alarm, what were they doing all the time, assuming they aren't the actual murderers?
Exactly. What were they doing?
Now, I'm hanged if I can give them the benefit of the doubt. What innocent woman would sit there laughing like I saw her and heard her a few hours after her husband had been murdered?
No, it was badly stage-managed, Watson. If there had been nothing else, this would have been enough to suggest conspiracy to my mind.
Then you say, Holmes, that Barker and Mrs. Douglas are definitely the murderers.
If you put it that Mrs. Douglas and Barker know the truth about the murder and are conspiring to conceal it, then I'm in full agreement. But just for the mental exercise, let's suppose that there was a guilty secret, a really shameful secret of some kind in this man Douglas's life. This leads to his murder by someone from outside, an avenger, perhaps.
All right.
So this avenger murders him. Before he gets away, Barker and Mrs. Douglas reach the room. The murderer convinces them that any attempt to arrest him will lead to the publication of some hideous scandal. They let him go.
They may even have lowered the drawbridge for him to escape by and then raised it again.
Yes. Well, now, after the murderer has gone, they realize that they placed themselves in a position where it may be difficult to prove that they were not the murderers. So they go to work quickly and rather clumsily to cover up. They mark the windowsill with Barker's blood-stained slipper to indicate how the murderer is supposed to have escaped.
Yes.
Then Mrs. Douglas creeps back to her room. Barker stays downstairs and raises the alarm half an hour after the gun was actually fired. Now, Watson, how will that suit you?
Very good, Holmes. Very good indeed.
Yes. The only thing to do after building up such an elaborate supposition, of course, is to prove it.
How in heaven's name can you do that?
Well, I think an evening alone in the study will help me.
Evening alone? Now, why on earth...
I've already arranged it with the estimable Ames. I shall sit in the study and see if its atmosphere brings me inspiration.
Oh, my dear Holmes.
You laugh, friend Watson. Well, we shall see. Oh, by the way, you have that big umbrella of yours with you, have you not?
Yes, I have.
I'll borrow it if I may.
Remind me to collect it this evening before I shut myself away, will you?
Certainly, certainly.
And meanwhile, we've nothing much to do but wait for our colleagues to come back from Tunbridge Wells, where they've been trying to get that bicycle identified. I'm afraid they're shooting in the dark.
Well, I don't mind admitting we were taking a shot in the dark, Mr. Holmes, but we've hit our target all the same.
You've identified the bicycle, Inspector?
We have, Dr. Watson, and got a description of our man.
Great. Yes. Congratulations.
Well, we started from the fact that Mr. Douglas had been in Tunbridge Wells the day before the murder. He'd seemed nervous the morning after he'd been there, and it seemed possible that while there he'd become conscious of some danger.
Very sound reasoning indeed.
Well, we took the bicycle over with us and did the rounds of the hotels. It was identified at once.
Yes, by the manager of the Eagle Commercial. Said it belonged to a man named Hargrave who'd taken a room there 2 days before. The landlord had no doubt the chap was an American.
Well, well, you've done some really solid work, while I've just been sitting here spinning theories with my friend.
That's just it, Mr. Holmes. Practical measures are what get the results.
Yes, we may fit in with your theories, Holmes.
That may be. But let's hear the end. How about his description, Mr. Mack?
Oh, I've got it here, such as it is. As usual, nobody seems to have taken much notice of him. About 5'9" in height, age about 50, hair slightly grizzled, greyish moustache, curved nose. A rather forbidding sort of face, they reckoned. He'd been seen to wear a heavy grey suit with a reefer jacket. He had a short overcoat, yellowish, and a soft cap.
What about the shotgun?
No one saw that. It could have fitted in his valise or under his overcoat quite easily.
Well, Mr. Mack, how do you think this bears on the general case?
Well, I reckon he may have cycled over here that morning, maybe hung about keeping an eye on the house, hoping Mr. Douglas would come out. You see, Mr. Holmes, I reckon he'd intended using that shotgun outside the house, not indoors. Oh, no one would think twice about a sporting gun going off in these parts.
Very good indeed, Mr. Mack. Watson?
Splendid idea. Obvious, come to think of it.
Well, Mr. Douglas didn't appear. What was Hargrave to do next? He left his bicycle and approached the house at twilight. The drawbridge was down and nobody about. He took a chance and slipped across and into the first room he came to. No one saw him. All right so far?
Capital. Pray go on.
He got in behind the curtains and waited there till 11:15 when Mr. Douglas came in. He shot him and got clear. He thought the bicycle might be identified, so he left it and made straight off to London or some other place where he'd got a safe hiding place.
Very good and clear. So far as it goes.
Eh? How do you mean?
My version has a different ending, I'm afraid.
Oh, it has it? Well, let's hear it then.
Remember our bargain, Mr. Mack. No theories until I have the facts to support.
No, but
not yet, Mr. Mack. I intend to go ahead with a little investigation of my own tonight. It's just possible it may contribute something to our common cause.
Want us to help? Anything to get us on a bit further?
No, thank you. My wants are simple. Darkness and Dr. Watson's umbrella.
What's that? I don't know what you're talking about, Mr. Holmes. Do you, Dr. Watson?
I haven't the faintest idea.
No?
Well, there's not much to it, really. Just a few lines of thought leading back to one basic question.
And what's that, then?
Why should an athletic man develop his frame with so unnatural an instrument as a single dumbbell?
Oh, really?
Well, perhaps I shall find out tonight. Perhaps I shall.
The Valley of Fear was one of the stories about Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. We're presenting it in 3 parts. You just heard part 2. In real life, my name's Norman Shelley. And it was my friend Carlton Hobbs who played Sherlock Holmes. I was Dr. Watson, and Michael Hardwick wrote the script for this BBC production from London. I hope we may have the pleasure of your company again very soon for that 3rd and last part of The Valley of Fear.
The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes.
Me too. It mightn't be so bad if you'd tell us what we've been doing here for the past 2 hours, Mr. Holmes.
Patience, gentlemen, patience. As to what it is that, gentlemen, is what we've been waiting for. See it?
What's happening? I can't see it. Yes. There's someone started to walk about in that lighted room there. Is that what you mean, Mr. Holmes?
That's it. That room is the study where the murder was done. Now, let's see what happens next.
Sometimes it was cold as well as puzzling. Sharing the adventures of Sherlock Holmes. Watson's my name. Dr. Watson. And let me first sum up events so far. And then I will tell you the astonishing solution to the Valley of Fear. Baffled as I was over the murder at Burleston Manor in Sussex. A code message, VV341, beside the corpse. His wedding ring taken. And the ring he'd been wearing above it carefully replaced by the murderer. And there was something very fishy going on between the widow and the deceased's best friend, Cecil Barker. Watson, Holmes said to me, they're lying. They're in a conspiracy to lie. Just so it struck me, too. But Holmes wouldn't be drawn into spinning any more theories until he got some more facts in his hands. He just kept on dropping hints about a blessed dumbbell that was missing from the murdered man's study. Lord knows what he was getting at. His latest idea was to spend an evening alone in the study and think things out. Why he needed my umbrella to help him, I can't think. On the way to the local police station next morning, he wouldn't say a word about it. But I knew he'd found something out. I'd seen that look in his eyes before.
Good morning to you, Mr. Holmes.
Good morning,
Constable,
gentlemen.
chair for Mr. Holmes, please. Dr. Watson.
Still on the track of the elusive bicyclist? What is the latest news of the rupture? Oh, what a pile of correspondence, Mr.
Yes, just look at it. Letters, telegrams. Do you know what they are?
I think I can guess.
Reports of this murderer of ours having been seen in half the towns of this country.
Oh, dear me, dear me. Now, Mr. Mack, and you, Mr. White Mason, I wish to give you a very earnest piece of advice.
Advice? What advice?
Abandon the case.
Now, look here, Mr. Holmes. You're holding something back.
Now, Mr. Mack, you know my methods. Once I've verified my details, I'll make my bow and return to London. My findings will be entirely at your service, and the credit will be yours. I owe you too much for it to be any other way. In all my experience, I cannot recall a case that's interested me more.
Well, sorry I was sharp. But it's all clean beyond me. We talked to you when we got back from Tunbridge Wells last night, and your ideas seemed to match up pretty well with ours.
That's right. What's happened since then to give you a completely new idea?
Well, since you pressed me...
Yes?
Oh, by the way, I've been reading a short but very interesting account of the Manor House.
Oh.
I got it for 1 penny from the local tobacconist. Here it is. You know, Mr. Mack, it adds no end to the zest of an investigation when one is in conscious sympathy with the historical atmosphere of one's surroundings.
Oh, no.
Oh, pray don't look so impatient. Even so bald an account as this can raise quite a vivid picture of the past in one's mind. Let me give you an example. Wait a minute. Here we are. Erected in the 5th year of the reign of James I, the Manor House of Burlstone is one of the finest surviving examples of the moated Jacobean reserve.
Oh, you're playing games with us, Mr. Holmes.
Well, I won't read it verbatim since you feel so strongly about it.
Thank you.
No, I'll simply tell you that there's some account in here of the taking of the place by a parliamentary colonel in 1644, of the concealment of Charles for some days in the Civil War, and finally of a visit there by George II. You see? You'll admit there are plenty of interesting associations with the old place.
But they're no business of ours.
Oh, are they not?
You get to your point sooner or later, but you've a deuced round-the-corner way of doing it.
Very well. I'll drop past history and get down to present-day facts.
Good.
I left Watson at our hotel last night and visited the manor house. I didn't see either Mrs. Douglas or Barker. I saw no necessity to disturb them. My visit was made especially to the good Mr. Ames, who allowed me, without reference to anyone else, to sit alone for a time in the study.
What were you doing?
Well, not to make a mystery of so simple a matter, I was looking for the missing dumbbell.
Oh, not that again.
It was always bulked rather large in my estimate of the case. I ended by finding it.
Where, Holmes? Well, it's Greek to me. We're bound to take you on your own terms, we know that, but when it comes to telling us to abandon the case...
Well, at least don't trouble to trace the mysterious gentleman whose bicycle got left behind. It won't help you.
And what do you suggest, then?
I suggest you take a nice, cheery, country walk.
What?
The views over the Weald are quite remarkable. No doubt you could get lunch at some suitable hostelry, though my ignorance of this part of the world prevents me from recommending
Look
one.
here.
Then in the evening, tired but happy...
Man, this is getting past a joke. If you think Mason and I've got nothing better to do than sit here and listen to you going on...
Dear me, Mr. Mac, I'm sorry if I've offended. Well, spend the day as you like. But meet me here before dusk, without fail.
Now that sounds more to the point, Mr. Holmes.
Oh, so does the rest of it. But I don't insist you take it, so long as you're here when I need you. Agreed, Mr. Mac?
Oh, very well, Mr. Holmes.
Now, before we part, I'd like you to do something for me.
Well?
I'll dictate a note to Mr. Barker. I want you to write it.
Right you are.
Begin, Dear Sir, it has struck me that it is our duty to drain the moat in the hope...
But that's impossible, Mr. Holmes. It can't be drained.
Never mind that. Please go on, Inspector.
I'm with you up to drain the moat.
Drain the moat in the hope that we may find something which may bear upon our investigation. All right?
Aye.
The workmen will divert the stream.
Look, Mr. Holmes, it just can't be done.
Divert the stream early tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
So I thought it best to explain matters beforehand.
Beforehand.
Yeah, that's all.
Right, then, I'll get this sent up right away.
No, wait a little, please. Send it by hand about 4 o'clock this afternoon, not before.
Oh, suits me.
Don't forget to sign it. And I think 4 o'clock would be an admirable time for us all to meet here at the police station again.
Oh, this is all beyond me.
Cheer up, Mr. Mac. Take my advice. A day in this bracing winter air would do you more good than worrying over that pile of reports. But please yourself. Come along, Watson. Game for a brisk walk?
Ah, like nothing better.
Splendid. Then we'll see you here at 4 o'clock, gentlemen. Now, gentlemen, it's a chill evening, and I don't know how long our expedition's going to last. You'd better wear your warmest things.
And what expedition may this be, Mr. Holmes?
I'll ask you all to go with me now to the outer bounds of the Manor House Park. There's a gap in the railings where we can get through to the shrubbery, nearly opposite the main door and the drawbridge. That's where I'm afraid we must spend a good deal of this exceptionally chilly evening. All ready, then?
I suppose so.
Very well, then. Let us be on our way.
I'm perished. Me too. It mightn't be so bad if you'd tell us what we've been doing here for the past 2 hours, Mr. Holmes.
Patience, gentlemen, patience. As to what it is that, gentlemen, is what we've been waiting for. See it?
What's happening? I can't see it.
Yes. There's someone started to walk about in that lighted room there. Is that what you mean, Mr. Holmes?
That's it. That room is the study where the murder was done. Now, let's see what happens next.
It's a man. He's come to the window.
He's opening it.
Oh, what's he doing now? He's been looking out at the night.
No, he's looking down
down into the moat. He's leaning out. Now for the hand, please. Listen carefully.
Quick as you can, everyone! Follow me!
Drawbridge start. We won't be long. No time to lose. Oh, sir, out of the way. Come on. Right. Come on, Mason. Hurry.
Good evening, Mr. Barker.
Holmes! What the devil's going on?
We're sorry to burst in like this, but we came to find something in a hurry. Here it is.
What on earth do you mean?
Why, this bundle you've just fished up from the bottom of the boat. Weighted down, gentlemen, with this dumbbell.
What?
Yes, the missing dumbbell turns up at last.
How in thunder did you know about this?
Quite simple. I put it there. You? Well, I should say I replaced it there. You'll remember, gentlemen, I was rather struck by the absence of the other half of that pair of dumbbells. I did draw your attention to it. There were so many other things on your mind, you had hardly the time to consider it.
But how did you...
When water is near and a weight is missing, Mr. Mason, it's not too far-fetched to wonder if something has been sunk in the water. The idea was worth testing at any rate. So, with the help of Ames, who admitted me to this room, and the crook of Dr. Watson's umbrella, I was able to fish up this bundle last night and inspect it.
Well, I'm wrong.
Of course, it was most important to be able to prove who had sunk it there in the first place. We accomplished this by the very simple device of announcing that the moat would be drained tomorrow, so that whoever he was would have to act under cover of darkness tonight to get it out before it was past.
Very clever indeed.
It's a pity you didn't know we couldn't have drained the moat if we'd tried, Mr. Barker.
What? Well, what's in the bundle then, Holmes?
I'll show you. Now, first, the dumbbell. We shan't need that anymore. Now, here we have a pair of boots. Note the toe caps, distinctly American. Then this knife in its sheath. Nasty-looking object, isn't it?
Certainly is.
And finally, this clothing. A complete set, in fact. Socks, underclothes, grey tweed suit, commonplace enough. But this overcoat. This yellow overcoat. Now, this is full of suggestive touches.
Hello. What's that in the lining?
Well, nothing in the lining, Mr. Mack. It's just a special pocket. Long enough to accommodate that sawn-off fowling piece we're already familiar with.
Devil it is.
And look, here at the neck is the tailor's tab. Neil Outfitter, Vermissa, USA. Vermissa. The Vermissa Valley, if I'm not mistaken. Now, what was it on that visiting card beside the body? VV341. VV. Vermissa Valley? I wonder. But I'm forgetting you, Mr. Barker. I mustn't stand in the way of your explanation.
Is that so? Well, all I have to say is that if there is any secret here, it isn't my secret. If that's the line you want to take, it'll be my duty. I'm doing it damn well, please.
Don't say another word, Cecil, please.
Mrs. Douglas. No, please, keep out of this. Please, leave it to me.
No, Cecil, you've done enough. Whatever's going to come of it, you've done enough.
Enough and more than enough. Mrs. Douglas, I think the moment has come for me to urge you to take the police into your confidence.
Oh, Mr. Holmes.
Perhaps I am at fault myself for not taking up the hint you passed through my friend Dr. Watson. Or you might have come forward then. The fact is, I had every reason to believe you were directly concerned in the crime. Now, I'm sure this is not so.
Just a moment, Mr. Holmes.
You must... Oh, Mrs. Douglas, there remains a good deal that is unexplained in this case. I would strongly recommend that we should hear it in his own words from Mr. Douglas.
Who? Mr. Holmes is right, Ivy, my dear.
Jack, darling, it's best this way. I know it is.
Mr. Douglas, sir. I am John Douglas.
But what? How on earth?
If you'd been looking towards the fireplace, you'd have seen for yourself, Inspector McCall.
Fireplace?
Ah, Mr. Mack, you would not read that excellent local compilation which told the story of Charles II's concealment, would you? People didn't hide in those days without reliable hiding places. I had persuaded myself we should find Mr. Douglas under this very roof.
So you let us waste our time searching for something
Not one instant was wasted, my dear Mr. Mack. I did not form my views of this case completely till last night. They could not be put to the proof until this evening, so I invited you and your colleague to take a day off. What more can I do?
Then do we understand that this man's been hiding just off this room for the past 2 days?
That's correct. And many is the time I've wanted to sing out and set you right.
Very considerate.
Inspector, I understand what you must be feeling about me. Let me tell you my story.
Very well, sir. But there's just one thing I'd like to know first from Mr. Holmes.
Well, Mr. Mack?
You knew Mr. Douglas was alive all the time, but how
Not
could you...
all the time, by any means. Not until I found this suit of clothes in the moat. They were obviously those of the missing cyclist from Tunbridge Wells, so it was fairly obvious to me at once that the body thought to be Mr. Douglas was really that of the missing man.
I see.
What had to be determined then was where Mr. Douglas could be. The balance of probability was that with the connivance of his wife and his best friend, he was concealed in this house, waiting for quieter times when he could make his escape.
Quite right, Mr. Holmes.
Well, all right for the moment, then. Mr. Douglas, I ought to caution you, sir, that anything you say...
No need, Inspector. I'll give you nothing but the truth. Well, to begin at the beginning. There are some men who good cause to hate me. Or that's the way they see it. It goes back to my days in America. It's all tied up with mining rights and my breaking the code of the Brotherhood. A secret society, if you like. The Ancient Order of Freemen, Lodge 341, Vermissa Valley. Mr. Holmes guessed right there. Well, never mind what it was all about. Labor rackets, political intrigue, that sort of thing. Kind of dirty work we only see in its mildest form in this country. Over there, the stakes are so high, they'll kill to make things go their way. And there are some fanatics who'll hunt a man to the world's end to shut his mouth. But I'll give it to you in detail, in writing.
Thank you, sir. We'll need that later.
Right. Well, it's gone. When I left the States, I changed my name and married and brought my wife to live in this out-of-the-way spot. After a while, everything seemed so peaceful. I thought they'd given me up. Then the day before all this happened here, I was over at Tunbridge Wells. I got a glimpse of a man in the street. I recognized him at once. A man called Hargrave. He was the worst of the lot. I'd no doubt why he happened to be in these parts.
So what did you do?
Simply came back here and stayed indoors all next day. There was still a chance he wouldn't be able to track me down to the house itself.
But he did.
Yes, Dr. Watson. Well, nothing happened all that day, and once the drawbridge was up and the doors and windows locked in the evening, I felt much more secure. But when I made my rounds of the house before going to bed, I always went round myself, I smelt danger the moment I came into the study.
What did you notice then, sir?
Nothing at first. And then I spotted the toe of a boot sticking out under the curtain there. I adjusted one candle that was in my hand, but there was a good light coming through the doorway from the hall. I put the candle down and jumped straight for the hammer I'd left lying after I'd hung some pictures. At the same moment, he sprang out at me with a knife.
We've caught up with her at last.
Hargrave.
Well, this time let's make it for keeps.
Come on, let's see you try.
Drop that hammer.
Down on your life.
Oh, God.
Jack, what the blazes is up?
It went off straight in his face. We were fighting. He managed to pull that gun out of his pocket. The trigger got pulled. I don't know which of us did it. What a ghastly sight. Who was it? One of them from America. I knew they'd catch up with me sooner or later.
Jack?
Lord! Ivy! No, Ivy! No, don't come in. For heaven's sake, stay outside.
Oh, what is it, Jack?
Listen, dear.
I want to do what I say. A man had been shot dead. It's a terrible sight. He'd broken in here. I promise I'll come and tell you about it as soon as I can.
But
I'm quite all right. Now go back upstairs, please. And not a word to a soul till I've been up to see you.
Oh, very well. But come soon.
Yes, I will. Jack, what do you make of this?
What?
Here, where his sleeve's written up. A brand mark, the same as yours. A triangle on a circle. Well, it's not surprising. We all had it. Just a minute. Listen. I can't hear anything.
That's just it. No one else is stirring. No one but Ivy and I heard the shot.
Well?
No one knows what's happened here but the three of us. Jack, we've got to work quickly.
Oh, for heaven's sake, what are you talking about?
Don't you see? The fellow's face is unrecognizable. He's about your height and build. He's got the same brand mark on his arm. Off you go upstairs. Get some of your night clothes and a dressing gown.
But
don't argue. Hurry. And don't let anyone see you. That's all his clothes. Weight the bundle with this dumbbell and drop it down into the mud.
Where's that card he had in his pocket?
VV341V. It's here.
We'd better put it under the body. 10 to 1, the idea is for it to get mentioned in the newspaper reports, so they have proof their man did his job.
Right. Then, what about the rings?
Rings?
Your rings, your wedding ring, and the one with the nugget. They'll never believe it's you without those. Ames is sure to notice.
I suppose I'll have to put them on him. And there's the nugget.
Right.
I'm afraid this wedding ring will never come off. Hasn't been off since the date was put on. Not a hope. Has to do with just the other one, then.
Nothing else. Let's have a look at you.
What is it?
That plaster on your chin. Cut yourself shaving this morning?
Yes.
Better let me have it.
Right.
Right. Now, put it on him. Not much skin left. There. How long has it taken us?
Nearly half an hour.
Fine. Now, Jack, you go into the secret room behind the fireplace. Then I'll give myself 5 minutes to tell Ivy what it's all about before I raise the alarm. As no one else heard the shot, it won't matter if there's nothing to hear this time.
Cecil, I'll have to thank you properly later, when all this is cleared up. I'm still pretty dazed.
Think nothing of it. In a few days, you'll be able to get away somewhere safe. I'll bring Ivy to join you. You change your name again, the gang will think Hargrave did his job and disappeared off. Your worries are over.
Well, I'll disappear now. Well, that's how it was, Inspector.
I see.
But perhaps you'd better hear the rest from Mr. Barker.
Yes, please.
Well, I just made a mark on the windowsill, and having planted that false clue, I rang the bell like mad when Mrs. Douglas came down again as arranged. That's all, gentlemen. Every word you've heard is the truth.
Yes, it's the truth.
This matter will have to go forward officially, you understand, sir. It'll get into the papers. Whoever they are, they'll know sooner or later how you tricked them.
I understand that, Inspector. We'll make our preparations to leave the country, and the minute it's all over, we can get away.
Out of the valley of fear forever, my darling.
Well, Holmes, they'll have sailed by now. And no one but ourselves and Mr. Barker knows where to.
I wonder, Watson. I wonder.
Oh, surely, Holmes, after all those precautions, to all intents and purposes, when he walked out of that assize court a free man, the earth opened and swallowed him up.
You forget who we're dealing with, Watson.
Professor Moriarty.
It's my guess he was responsible for tracking Douglas down.
You think they engaged Moriarty to help them, and now they'll ask him to do the whole job?
He'll be very aggrieved if they don't. He'll have read by now how his work has been wasted. Mrs. Hudson.
There's a note for you, Mr. Holmes. I found it pushed under the street door.
Oh, thank you, Mrs. Hudson.
Thank you, sir.
Now, what have we here? Written with a J pen on expensive paper in a cultivated but disguised hand. Oh.
Who's it from? What is it?
There's no signature. She doesn't need one. It simply says, "Dear me, Mr. Holmes. Dear me."
Moriarty?
Exactly.
Can't you make any move against him?
On what grounds? With what proof?
Then must he always have the opening gambit while you follow a move behind?
That's it, Watson. But I shall beat him in the end. Never doubt that. There have been devils like Moriarty loose in the world since long before our time. And there always will be. And someone's always got the better of them, sooner or later.
Always been a Sherlock Holmes man, eh?
And a Dr. Watson. Complete, of course, with the vital umbrella. Now, come along, my dear Watson. Pass me my Stradivarius. And you like your flight.
Well, now you've heard part 3, you know the ending of the Valley of Fear. It was one of the stories of Sherlock Holmes from the inspired pen of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. My name, my real name, is Norman Shelley. My old friend Carlton Hobbs played Sherlock Holmes, and I was Dr. Watson. Michael Hardwick wrote our script for this BBC production from London. And, of course, I look forward to the pleasure of your company again, soon, for more of the adventures of Sherlock Holmes.